wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who is here today. We are excited to talk about security incident response. It's going to be, I think, very timely and very helpful. Our goal is to be as educational as possible. We invite you to interact with us in any way you feel comfortable. You're welcome to submit your questions in the chat. You can raise your hand or just go ahead and mute yourself, ask for clarification, or ask any questions you might have. We're happy to answer, and we just want to be a great resource for you. Also, a big thank you to Virginia Community Healthcare Association for having us today. They have been so crucial in providing great information, great resources to all of their clients, and we're happy to be here with them. We are Strategic Solutions, an IT managed service provider specifically for healthcare clients. Because we focus and service just the healthcare industry, we have an insane amount of knowledge and experience in the specific hurdles that healthcare clients face, and we hope that that will come in handy through this presentation and anything else you might have a question about. So today we sort of want to talk about security incident response, and that is essentially what to do after you've been hacked, after there's been a security incident, and how we can plan for that emergency, what we can do now to plan for when that happens, and how what we do to plan now can help make a security incident less intrusive than before. So what exactly is a security incident? A security incident is essentially when something goes wrong and the security of your systems or your data has been compromised, whether that is through access by someone who was unauthorized or access by an authorized person to data they were not authorized to see. So there are so many different ways to identify a security incident because a security incident can be so many things. It can look like someone trying too many times, doing a brute force attack on your password. It can look like someone finding your data on the internet. It can look like somebody trying to gain access to your firewall. It can be someone who phished you, got your credentials, signed into your email, someone who's trying to sign into your EHR online, or even just someone who found printouts or x-rays of your patients in an area they weren't supposed to be in. There's so many different ways to identify it. It's important that everyone be trained and knowledgeable of what a security incident looks like. And now also, what is the difference between a security incident and a breach? We want to be very careful during our security incident response to not use those words together. They seem like they're the same thing, but they're not. We don't want to be saying breach until it's confirmed. So security incident is something that threatens the confidentiality, the availability, or the integrity of your patient information or your protected information or your systems. A breach is when we can confirm that an unauthorized party has accessed your patient information. So security incident is what's happening, and a breach is once it's confirmed. We definitely don't want to be saying the word breach. That's a little scary. And it also is indicating something that maybe might not be true. So we always want to stick with security incident when we're planning for these security incidents, but also when we are investigating them. So we like to say there are two types of disasters. There's natural and there's man-made. So one natural disaster that happened recently was that big Hurricane Ida. We personally have a peer that works out of New Orleans, and they spend all year preparing their clients for hurricanes because hurricanes are just so prevalent in the New Orleans area. It's actually been studied, and there is a 21% chance that hurricanes in the Atlantic Ocean will hit New Orleans. And there's also a 29% chance that they will make landfall in Louisiana. That's pretty staggering, honestly, because they're saying there's almost one in three chance that this natural disaster, this hurricane, is going to be affecting their business. So it's important to start planning ahead of time for how you're going to survive this natural disaster. On the other hand, we say that security incidents are sort of a man-made disaster. And because they're a man-made disaster, they really don't have a season. You know, hurricanes have a season. We know that they're going to be happening between June and November. But a man-made disaster is anytime, anywhere, any day. And because of the probability of this happening at any time, we need to be prepared at all times. Lately, it's really not a question of if we're going to get breached, if we're going to have a security incident. It's almost a question of when, which is why it's just so important to start preparing for these emergencies now by having your security incident response plan ready. Security incidents are not geographic, they're not seasonal, and they're really an ever-present, ever-looming threat to any business, which is why we feel it's so important to start planning ahead of time by creating your security incident response plan. You might remember this graphic from the very first webinar that we did talking about emergency preparedness. Studies have shown that organizations that have planned ahead of time, while during that security incident, during that emergency, the response or the happiness of their clients might go down, but those that planned ahead of time for these emergencies ends up coming out on top. The difference is staggering. Those that planned, their client satisfaction actually went up 7% from the time of impact, but those that hadn't planned are very negatively affected. They're negative 15% affected, which is just another reason why it is so important to start planning your security incident response now before there is actually a security incident. So the good news is we have sort of a blueprint for this type of plan. In 2013, the President issued an executive order for Nist, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, to develop a framework that is completely voluntary that is designed to reduce cyber risk for critical infrastructure. So the framework is voluntary guidance. It's based on standards, guidelines, and practices so that organizations can better manage and reduce their cybersecurity risk. So it's designed to be flexible, it's designed to be repeatable, and it's designed to be cost-effective so that it can be applied by businesses of all sizes and all industries. But beyond that, in 2021, the government actually signed into law a bill that will require the HHS to limit their HIPAA fines for organizations that can demonstrate that they are following this Nist cybersecurity framework called the HIPAA Safe Harbor Act. That's a topic for another day, but it is something to sort of put away in your head for later. We're going to be looking at this Nist cybersecurity framework, the sort of phases in it, and that is sort of going to help us plan out our security incident response plan. So we're going to be covering these stages at a high level and sort of what they can mean for your security incident response plan. So our first phase, in identify, we're really just preparing for the security incident. This is something that has to be done before a security incident takes place, but it still needs to be part of your plan. So really our first step is a critical applications analysis. We want to know exactly what we have going. We sort of talked about this last time during the security risk assessment webinar, but we need to know what we're protecting. We need to know what we need to bring up. We need to know what we need to look at during the security incident response. So we need to have an inventory of all of our assets. So not just hardware, not just PCs, servers, laptops, firewalls. We also need to know our software, so our EHR, our email, our fax software, printouts. We need to sort of have an inventory of everything that we have so we know what we need to protect, and we need to sort of assign a level of criticality to it. So following a security incident, what do we need to bring back first? What do we need to clean and bring back into operational state first? And it's going to be the most critical applications, the most critical assets. So by completing that sort of critical applications analysis first, we know exactly what we need to secure, but we also know what we need to focus on during that initial security incident. That critical applications analysis is also going to inform our security risk assessment. We talked last time about how we need to be completing security risk assessments at least every every year, and again after any big change. So it's important to have that security risk assessment done so we know exactly what our vulnerabilities are. We're taking steps to secure those vulnerabilities, make us a little bit more secure, and hopefully stave off the security incident or make the security incident less impactful. So while it's a work in progress, it will definitely help inform our security incident response because we'll know what things we're sort of at risk for. So we are still sort of in the planning process. We're still in the preparation phase, but now we're in the protect phase. We know exactly what we need to protect because of our identify phase, but now we need to talk about let's plan. So a big part of this is going to be creating your security incident response team, or CIRT. It is incredibly important that you have elected individuals or teams to specific roles and then train them on what they need to do. One of the biggest parts of your CIRT, or Security Incident Response team, is your Incident Response Lead. This person is going to be running with everything. They are the lead. So they're going to be working with the technical teams, working with law enforcement, working with legal, working with cyber insurance. They're going to be hopefully very knowledgeable in what the security incident response plan is for your organization and also who they need to be working with. We want to make sure we have a technical team. If this emergency, this security incident is of a technical nature, let's say someone got phished and now there's ransomware on your EHR, who is that technical team that you're going to work with to remediate that risk and bring everything back to normal? Make sure that you know who those individuals are and that they are trained in what they need to do should this security incident take place. It's also important to have an executive sponsor. So that's going to be, maybe someone in your C-suite at your organization that has complete buy-in with this process. They are aware of what this plan looks like. They're aware of the roles of their employees and the role of their third-party contacts, and they are there to help in whatever way possible. That executive sponsor, having that buy-in from the C-suite is going to be super important in making sure that the efforts of the CIRT are in line with the efforts of the business, and you're sort of meeting those business goals and driving everything forward in the most correct way possible. Like we showed in that graph, these teams that have full buy-in and are fully preparing are more likely to be generally more appreciated by their clients, by their patients, and by their third parties. It's also going to be important to have someone trained in communications. So that person or team of people will be responsible for communicating not just with patients that might be affected, but maybe with the media, maybe with law enforcement. Their job is to make sure everyone is communicating, knows what's going on, and the correct message is getting out, which is why it's so important to start planning and training these people so early. The last thing you want is someone who's really not trained in what they're supposed to say during this incident and going off and saying, oh yeah, we've been breached. That would sort of be terrible. So we want to make sure we have communications coordinators who are coordinating not just who needs to hear the message, but what message will most effectively support your efforts. It's going to be very important to have a trusted external consultant. This is most likely your cyber liability insurance carrier. They are going to be instrumental in this process because they might have teams, they might have people that you need to do, and they also might have specific steps that you're supposed to do in order to be considered for coverage. So it's very important to have their contact information ready to go in your security incident response plan, but it's also important to make sure that you're involving them every step of the way to make sure that you can get coverage as you were expecting to receive. Legal representation is also very important. It is very important to have a legal team on hand, their contact information in your security incident response plan, and ideally someone with experience in not just HIPAA and healthcare, but also in security incidents and maybe cyber liability. They're going to be very helpful in making sure you're doing things by the book, you're doing things correctly, and just providing that high-level guidance that maybe not everyone could have access to. And then last is our forensic analyst. This will likely be sort of dictated by your cyber liability insurance provider. But when we're in the midst of investigating this incident, this cyber security risk that sort of became realized, they're going to probably point you towards a forensic analyst company that can really do a deep dive into what happened, figuring out the root cause, and identifying what patient information was involved. If that is not provided or required by your cyber liability insurance carrier, you want to make sure you have one picked out of your own. The last thing you want is during that security incident response, you're just Googling forensic analysts. We want to make sure you have that relationship in place prior to the security incident. So that's why it's part of our planning phase. So now we're planned. We have our security incident response team. We know what we're protecting. Everyone is trained on their responsibilities and their roles as soon as a security incident hits. And look, a security incident hit. We have detected some sort of security incident. So let's talk about a typical scenario. You know, it's Monday morning, 7 a.m., your staff has arrived, patients are about to walk in the door, they're maybe waiting in your waiting room, and your front desk is trying to log in, but it's just not working. They're trying and they're trying and trying again, but something sort of scary comes up on their screen. They realize that your system has been ransomware. This is a pretty great indicator of a security incident. So at this point, it might be time to kick off your security incident response plan. So what do we need to do at the time of detection? Initially, we need to start doing our initial investigation, our initial assessment. We need to very quickly and accurately determine who discovered this incident. So who was the first person to notice something was off? What did they see? How did things act? When did that first start happening? When did they first notice it? Where did they first notice it? How is it impacting the business? And do we have an idea of how that might have happened? This will sort of inform what we do next in the plan. So it's very important to do this sort of initial investigation, whether that is by contacting your IT team, your technical team, and saying, ooh, something's weird, can you take a look? Or whether it's saying, oh, I know exactly what happened. This has been acting weird, last time it was this. But at this point, we have detected this security incident. It is time to officially kick off our security incident response plan. So in that incident response plan, we do our initial investigation, and we need to make a decision. Is this a security incident, or is this just a one-off? Is it a fake pop-up that the front desk is seeing, or is the system actually ransomware? We need to do our investigation. We need to then determine, yes, this is a for real security incident, and we need to kick off our security incident response plan by alerting the security incident response team, the CERT. So alerting those team members, getting everyone ready, they know what to do, and they're ready to start taking action. I say take action, but really it's not time to remediate immediately. It is incredibly important here because our primary objective is to contain the malware. We don't want to immediately focus on this one machine, get rid of it for whatever we can do. We need to isolate the machines, the assets, the applications, wherever that security incident is taking place. We need to isolate that and make sure it does not spread any further. So whether that is taking it off the internet or basically probably just taking it off the internet, but we need to isolate it and make sure it cannot infect anyone else, it cannot spread any further, but we also need to preserve the evidence. We have a little crime scene photo here because it essentially really is a crime scene. We need to preserve all the evidence of the security incident so that we can have the information that is necessary to know exactly what happened, how it got there, what it's affecting, and how we can stop it. That preservation of the evidence is incredibly important, which is why, people typically say, oh, something is going crazy, unplug your machine from the power so that it can't go any further. That is no longer really what is ideal. Ideally, we would unplug it from the internet, you take it off the internet, but still keep the machine on so that your forensic analyst, your technical team can sort of take an image, see what's happening, and investigate exactly where everything came from to better inform how we're going to move forward. So this preservation, these steps for preservation of the evidence, for isolation, all need to be sort of documented and trained in your security incident response plan. We need to make sure that people know exactly how they plan to isolate systems, isolate applications, isolate users, isolate sites. They need to know exactly how they're going to do that and have that documented in your security incident response plan, but they also need to know exactly how they're going to preserve this evidence, how they're going to make an image, how they're going to lead their users through preserving the evidence without infecting or putting others at risk. All of that needs to be determined by your technical team, by your CERT team, and documented as part of your security incident response plan. Moving forward, we've identified the issue, we've isolated the issue, we're preserving our evidence. We need to make sure that while we're focusing all of our information, all of our attention on not allowing the infection or the incident to spread or affect others, we also need to remember we need to keep everyone informed. We also need to start making a decision on who we're going to engage. Are we going to engage the cyber liability insurance provider? At this point, we have enough information to know whether or not we should. Are we going to engage law enforcement? Are we going to engage the FBI? The FBI has actually an internet crimes complaints system that you can sort of submit these incidents to, and they may or may not provide guidance and do some investigation of their own. But at this point, we need to start informing and thinking about who we're going to inform. Are we going to inform our staff? Because is this affecting them in any way? And if so, what are we going to tell them? Are we going to inform our patients that we're, experiencing some sort of issue? And if so, what does that message look like? Are we going to tell law enforcement? Are we going to get their help? Do we need to get cyber liability insurance people involved? Who do we need to get involved? And what is our message to them? It's important that while we are in the midst of things, we are also keeping everyone informed. We're leveraging our communications coordinators, and everyone sort of is on the same page as to what is happening now and what we are expecting to happen next. Perfect. So our incident has taken place. We've sort of identified what it is. We've contained it. Everyone is involved. We're ready to go. We now need to know, what is the root cause? We have the information that we need from our preserved logs, our preserved images, our preserved machines, our preserved applications, but we need to figure out exactly what was the root cause so that we can make sure that that was all stopped. We need to make sure that the attack is done. It cannot spread anymore. It cannot affect any other machines, and we need to be sure of that. We need to remove the threat and make sure that there is no lingering evidence or lingering programs, lingering things that could come up later and sort of affect us, whether that is resetting passwords, whether that is resetting wireless networks, whether that is wiping something clean. We need to know exactly what we expect of our team during this response phase. How do we expect them to eradicate and resolve any sort of risks or security incidents? Those steps all need to be predetermined, pre-discussed, pre-documented, and also pre-trained. We need to make sure our team knows exactly what they can do, what tools are at their fingertips for them to eliminate the root cause, stop the attack, and remove the threat. So while we're doing that, we want to make sure our security incident response plan is including things that we didn't think about before. In the heat of the moment, it is so hard to remember, oh yeah, we also need to export the logs from the email because that might have been the initial point of entry. It is so hard to remember all these little things that could be done. So that's why it's so important to sort of start thinking about all of the different types of security incidents that could affect your organization and what you expect your technical team to do, what you expect your communication coordinators to do, and having that all documented as part of your security incident response plan. So now that we've identified the risk, we've stopped it, we've taken care of all the little remnants of the risk, we're sure of it, we're working with our cyber liability insurance provider, we're doing everything that they expect of us, we think we're all good to go, it is time to bring our systems back to normal. So these steps are very important to have documented because you want to make sure that this is a fast transition as possible so that it's not affecting your patients, your organization, as much as it may if you hadn't thought about it beforehand. So we need to make sure we have steps documented for restoring our systems, so making sure they're doing a clean restore, they're coming back onto the organization's network, they're coming back to the internet, they're ready to go, and they're clean. There's nothing else left on them. And we also want to make sure that everything is sort of back to normal. We've been sort of operating in a business continuity state during the security incident. We still want to make sure we're seeing our patients, we're doing what we can then, but once we're restoring everything, we're bringing everything back to what it was before the security incident, but hopefully a little bit more secure. So during the restore process, not only are we bringing things back to what they were before, we're restoring them, we also want to look at what we can do to restore that into a more clean state, a more secure state. Are there changes that we need to make to specific systems, applications, users, passwords, etc., to make sure that they're more secure than they were before, and therefore less prone to the same incident happening again? Because like we know, once a bad actor knows that your system was susceptible to specific attack, they know that they could probably still do it again. So it's important that we're not just restoring, but we're recovering in a more secure state. All of these steps need to be thought about, documented, and trained for your staff so that they are ready to sort of do that when the duty calls. Once everything is restored, it's more secure than ever, we want to make sure we're reviewing exactly what happened during that security incident response plan. What happened before, so what led to the security incident, but also how did we respond, and what parts do we need more training on? What parts do we need to further document? This plan for your security incident response is an ever-breathing document. It's ever-growing. It's always going to be refined, whether it's refined because you went through the security incident response once, or you might want to refine it when you read something in the news. There's this new Microsoft Paulina attack. If that actually took place, do we have all the steps documented on things we need to think about to respond and recover from that sort of attack? If not, we want to make sure that that is included. We want to make sure we're reviewing our CERT team's actions. Did they do everything correctly according to the plan? If so, that's great. But was that enough? Do we need to change the plan? If they didn't do things according to the plan, why not? Was there not enough training? Do we need to focus on providing additional context or additional training to specific teams or individuals? We just want to make sure that after every incident, we're not only looking at how do we stop the incident, how do we secure ourselves moving forward, but how do we improve our response plan? And then should your security incident response, or should your security incident have involved patient information, EPHI, once it is all said and done, it is important to report it to the correct parties. The first part of that, as required by HIPAA, is to complete another risk assessment. We're assuming we've done one once a year, but after security incident, you need to perform a risk assessment, or at least revisit your risk assessment to see what patient information was disclosed, or was it disclosed. If your patient information was disclosed, it was accessed by an unauthorized party, or you can't prove definitively that it wasn't accessed by an unauthorized party, then it's time to move on to the report phase. So you know exactly what patient information was was accessed by unauthorized parties, you need to follow the HIPAA regulations to alert those affected individuals, but you also may need to alert your business associates if they're in any way affected. If there are a lot of patient information involved in the security incident, then you have to alert the media, and you also have to alert HHS. So it's important to have those steps as part of your security incident response plan, because you have a limited window of availability after the security incident response to report it in the legal sense. So within that window, you need to make sure that it is getting reported as required by HIPAA. So the steps for doing so should be included in your plan, so you're doing it properly. But you also need to maintain documentation of the security incident, of your investigation into the incident, of your risk assessment following the incident. That all needs to be maintained for 6 years, just because it could be requested by the OCR, by HHS within that period of time. But I think one of the most important parts to think about the security incident response plan and security incident response planning is that it is not a one and done plan. As we talked about earlier, it is constantly living and breathing. It is constantly changing. So not only did our plan sort of take us through that Nist cybersecurity framework from identify, protect, detect, resolve, remediate, not only did our plan go through that, but it goes over and over and over again. It's always a cycle. Once we finish our security incident, we're reviewing our plan, we're reviewing the security incident, and we're starting all over again. This is never going to stop being reviewed, never going to stop being necessary, and will only serve to improve the security posture of your organization moving forward. So not only are we reviewing the plan, but we're reviewing our training exercises. We're reviewing our testing exercises, because the great news is if you don't have a security incident, then you don't have a chance to implement your security incident response plan. But you don't want to wait for a security incident to test it, to sort of do a run through. You want to make sure that you are maybe doing a simulation at least once a year to make sure your employees, your staff, your third parties know exactly what is expected of them. So whether that's just a regular tabletop exercise, maybe everyone sits around a conference table and say, okay, let's pretend that our EHR system has been ransomwared. Let's verbally walk through the security incident response plan, and each person, each team who has a role in the CERT sort of talks about what they would do in that incident, and we can sort of talk it through without having to actually ransomware your own EHR to test. It's very important that not only is the plan reviewed, but it's tested and individuals are trained as needs change, as threats evolve, and as teams change. As always, we are so happy to be a resource moving forward. We invite you, even if you don't have a question right now, maybe you take this back to your team and talk about what exactly have we done for security incident response planning? Who knows what they're going to do if this were to happen to us? What can we do to better prepare? Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions. We're happy to help. It's always better to plan ahead of time than to be stuck in the midst of things, being sort of unaware and unsure of what to do. Maybe you expect someone else to do something, then they're unaware of their responsibility. Please reach out. Let us know if you have any questions. As always, we will have the recording of this webinar as well as the slide deck available for you, so that hopefully it will help propel your efforts forward. I want to thank Virginia Community Healthcare Association so much for having us here today. They are also a great resource for emergency planning and sort of getting any sort of resources together that might help in this effort. Otherwise, I thank you all so much. Reach out with any questions. Enjoy the rest of your day.